You're very big on Kant, and Kant is sort of a quasi-natural law theorist, but not quite. And what's your fondness for Kant? Because you're obviously a deeply religious Christian. Kant is, at best, a sort of nominal Christian.
Well, what Kant was doing was, in the moment that he was, the way I read him, okay, and I'm not a sophisticated philosophy reader, but I have read a lot of it, and this is my take on what he was doing. Was he saw very early on in the Enlightenment, in this new scientific world, as the Germans did, that God was in trouble and our beliefs were in trouble. But he also saw what I think is beyond question, that morality could not survive the death of God, and I think Nietzsche saw that too. A lot of people saw it, and so he came up. Because it is really difficult once you start to actually make the argument that morality doesn't exist. It sounds good if you're in your dorm smoking dope at 3 a.m, but in real life, you can't really make the serious argument. And he saw that, so he thought, well, then there must be a God. And in order for there to be a God, there really must be sort of two planes of existing. And I think this is obviously true. A phenomenal plane, he called it, and the noumenal plane. And the phenomenal plane is speaking to us of a noumenal plane that we can never quite know. And this is the remarkable thing about our culture. I always say our culture is founded on two people, Socrates and Jesus. Both of them were dealing with an intellectual class that didn't believe in truth. Both of them believed that there was a truth. Neither of them spoke the truth directly. Jesus told stories and he said, I am the truth, which is a very sophisticated, difficult, concept. And Socrates was always asking those annoying questions that got him killed, but they never said, they said there was a truth, but they were approaching it. They were always moving toward it. And that's essentially what Kant was doing. Kant, I feel, was kind of rewriting and updating Plato to say that, yes, there is this world outside the cave. We're looking at these shadows, but there is a world of light that creates the shadows. We can never quite get to that light, but it is there, and we can move toward it. And he did say that the fundamentals of Christian belief were, you could believe in the fundamentals of Christian belief, the afterlife, judgment, incarnation. You could believe in all those things if you believed in this noumenal world. And so all I'm saying is that he puts down a roadmap of understanding that I have found very helpful. It's not like he also has this wonderful talk about how we receive information and it takes shape in our minds because our minds have a way of giving it shape, which I think has turned out to be scientifically the case, That to me is really important because it's one thing to say to me, the world is not as I see it as a human being. The table is really just a force field or whatever you want to say. But it is true that if I turn north at 53rd Street, I'll get to 54th Street every single time. So the world, the phenomenal world that I see is not untethered. It's not untethered to the noumenal world. And I think that that's important because I think that human beings are important in and of themselves, and the way we see them is justified in and of itself.
So this is you're making a very natural law argument to the extent that you say that the universe is essentially discoverable. Kant's argument is that the universe, you could not necessarily that you could tell teleology from the universe around you in sort of the Aquinas sense, but more that by searching your own moral sensibility, you could come up with the idea of God because we all have these interior moral sensibilities. So then what need is there for religion in the first place? Why not just be sort of a Kantian, just make that your religion?
Because I really do think, and when you read the Bible, a lot of this has to do with guarantees of the truth, the revelation of the burning bush, the revelation of the incarnation. These are things where God is saying to us, yes, I know this path makes sense. I know this relativistic path can make sense. You can analyze things forever. Follow this light. And I don't think it's one thing to say that we could have thought of that by ourselves, but could we have believed it by ourselves? I'm not quite sure. I actually don't believe we could.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. And I think that this is sort of the Judaic perspective on Greek thought, for example, is there's this famous statement by Yehuda Halevi, who's a very famous rabbi in, I believe, the 11th century. And his statement was basically that Greek philosophy is beautiful but has no fruit. Meaning that it's wonderful to study and it's wonderful to learn about, but it doesn't actually dictate action in the same way that an implicit command to do things does, or an implicit rule book for living does.
And it's kind of arrogant of some of these thinkers to say, well, we couldn't even recognize the truth if we didn't already know the truth. what difference does that make? We're walking around in the dark. There's got to be, if there's light at the end of the hallway, you've got to be able to see the light to know which way to walk. And I think that really is what our faith does. Our faith says to you, when Jesus said, love God, love your neighbor, everything else is built on that. And there's a rabbi, right?
Yeah, Rabbi Hillel says the same thing.
Essentially the same thing. That's
sort of the reverse. He uses the silver rule, right? He says that that which is hateful to your neighbor, do not do.
And I think that when you have that kind of rule, for instance, when I'm reading the Bible and it seems to me to be telling me that, this guy, I can get rid of this guy, he's no good, I go back to that and I say, no, if I got there, I made a mistake. I made a mistake. You have to have some basis, some light that you're moving toward. And Revelation is that light. I really don't believe that you can get there any other way. And I think it's tremendously arrogant to think that you could think your way to the light, because you can think your way right off the edge of a cliff. And I've seen people do it.
So how do we actually re-inculcate some of these beliefs? Because obviously this is, the work in which you're engaged, it's the work in which I'm engaged.
Yeah.
It's daunting, obviously, because you have an entire culture that is built to believe in its arrogance that it could have created all these values just tabula rasa, even after a century of us slaughtering each other at unprecedented rates.
Yeah.
It's an uphill battle. I mean, people have an easier time believing in no God than in God.
Yep.
So how do you get to this?
Well, I think one of the problems we're having right at this moment is that politics is the opposite of thought in some ways, that politics demands that you make a choice between Democrat and Republican, this one or that one. And it's very hard for people to say, yeah, I'm choosing the Republican, but he's a jerk. He got a better idea. This guy is a jerk. Ideas matter a lot. Ideas really do matter a lot, because all of us are so broken and sinful and creepy in some way, that like this whole idea that you can point at somebody and say, oh, well, he did this when he was 17 and therefore, you think, what does he represent? Tell me first what he represents, and then tell me whether he can't represent that or can represent that. And so I think that we are fighting over ideas. We're fighting over the stories we tell. I think these two things are immensely equally important. And I think that what can we do but speak these ideas in all their complexity and tell our stories as clearly as we can? What else can we do? And then have faith. I do have faith. I do believe that ideas that don't make sense collapse. I believe that modernism collapsed because it was secular, and postmodernism, which makes literally no sense whatsoever, beat modernism because it exposed something in modernism that didn't work. Secular humanism actually didn't work. So I have faith in those ideas. The thing that I think we all worry about, you'd be a fool not to worry about, is as you're moving toward the light, as you're moving toward the good, what horrors will occur? And we just don't know. You live in faith and you live each day hoping that this is not that day.